Today, we're diving into something that shapes years of our lives, but that most of us, honestly, rarely even think about: the curriculum process.
I mean, have you ever really thought about it? Sat in a classroom and just wondered, who decided this was what I needed to learn? Why this specific math problem or this particular historical event? Where did all this stuff come from? Well, it all boils down to one core idea, the curriculum. And the simplest way to get your head around it comes from the educator Hilda Taba, who said a curriculum is simply a plan for learning. That's it. It's the invisible architecture of our education, the blueprint that spells out exactly what students should learn, why they should learn it, and how it's all going to happen. So let's pull back the curtain and take a closer look at this unseen blueprint. We're going to explore the different ways educators have tried to draw it up over the years. You know, this isn't just a random process. For decades, it's been this epic quest to find the perfect formula, a logical, almost foolproof method for building an effective education, right from the ground up. The first big attempt at cracking this code can be thought of as the rational recipe. These were models that treated curriculum development like a very logical, step-by-step process. You just follow the instructions. One of the founding fathers of this whole idea was a guy named Rolf Tyler. Back in 1949, he argued that this process had to be systematic. And his big idea, which was kind of revolutionary at the time, was this: start with the end goal. Figure out exactly where you want your students to be when they're done, and then you just work backwards from there. So Tyler broke it all down into 4 fundamental questions. First, what are your objectives? What's the point? Second, what learning experiences will get you there? 3, how do you actually organize all those experiences? And finally, number 4, how do you check if you actually did what you set out to do? That's your evaluation. It's a classic straight-line model for building a curriculum. Then along came Hilda Taba. Now, she loved Tyler's logical approach, but she basically flipped the whole thing on its head. She championed what's known as the grassroots model. Her thinking was, instead of having the curriculum handed down from on high, why not let the teachers, the people who are actually in the trenches, design it themselves? So Taba expanded Tyler's 4 steps into a more detailed 7-step process. But here's the absolute game changer. It all starts with step 1, diagnosis of needs. Before you do anything else, you figure out what your specific students actually need to learn. It's still a logical sequence, but it builds from the ground up, not from the top down. Okay, but what if a straight line isn't the best way to get where you're going? Well, the next evolution of this idea moved beyond that linear recipe and into something way more dynamic, something like a responsive loop. Cyclical models totally change the game. They see curriculum not as a product that you finish and say, ta-da, but as a continuous process. It's a feedback loop, right? It's always changing, always adapting as new students come in, new ideas pop up, and, the world itself changes. And the key innovation these models brought to the table was a brand new first step: situational analysis. This means that before you even start talking about objectives, you do a deep dive into the context, the specific school, the students you have, the community you're in, all of it. A great example of this is D.K. Wheeler's model from 1967. At first glance, it looks a lot like the rational models, right? It's got 5 clear phases, but here's the twist. The last step, evaluation, isn't the end. The results from that evaluation feed directly back into step 1, changing your aims for the next time around. The blueprint is never truly finished. So let's just pause and make that distinction super clear. Rational models are like a straight road. You start with your objectives and you drive to your destination, evaluation. Cyclical models, on the other hand, are more like a roundabout. You start by analyzing the traffic, the situation, and your evaluation constantly tells you how to navigate that loop again and again. Okay, so we've got all these elegant, logical theories. Sounds great, right? But what actually happens when these perfect blueprints meet the beautifully chaotic reality of a classroom? Well, here's the reality check. Researchers have found time and time again that most teachers, well, they don't really use these formal step-by-step models when they're planning their lessons. So what's the deal? Why the disconnect? It's because these neat and tidy flowcharts, they often just can't capture the real-time, dynamic, and wonderfully messy human element that is a classroom. Education isn't just a plan on paper. It's a live performance, an interaction between teachers, students, and ideas. So does this mean all these models are useless? Should we just toss them out?
No, absolutely not. The key is understanding what they're really for, which is to bridge that gap between the grand theories and everyday practice. Think of it this way. A great chef doesn't follow a recipe to the letter every single time they cook, right? But understanding the principles behind that recipe, the why behind each step, that's what makes them a great chef. It's the same thing here. These curriculum models give educators a powerful language, a framework for thinking that helps them be more intentional and systematic, even if they aren't literally checking off boxes. And a perfect example of this bridge in action is something called the curriculum development cycle. This is a real-world tool that schools actually use. It's basically a systematic schedule for designing, reviewing, and implementing curriculum changes over several years. What this cycle does is it takes those big ideas from the theoretical models, things like needs assessment, development, and evaluation, and it puts them on a practical, manageable calendar. This makes sure that the curriculum doesn't get old and stale, and that every subject gets a fresh look in an orderly way. Now, of course, all the ideas we've talked about today are built on decades of incredible research and deep thought by some brilliant educators. For any of you who want to dive in deeper, we've listed the key sources for this explainer right here. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. As our world changes faster than ever before, what should a curriculum even be? Should it be a fixed blueprint that we just build and follow? Or should it be more like a living conversation, one that is constantly adapting, responding, and evolving right along with us?